Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 65, Al and Point of Insanity. Al runs a podcast that covers a bunch of different nerd topics, mostly horror related, and he also makes a few of his TTRPGs, so sit down and listen to us talk about it. I'm here today with Al from the Point of Insanity game studio. Hi, Al.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing yourself?
Oh, not too bad. Happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's when we're recording this. And the local zoo that I go to when I go to the zoo has a Star Wars Day where a bunch of people come in dressed up as Mandalorians, Stormtroopers, Darth Vader, all of that. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, before we start talking about RPGs and the Point of Insanity Game Studio podcast, want to hear who you are outside of, I guess, not entirely nerd stuff, because there's usually a lot that comes along with that, but outside of RPGs.
Okay, well, I'm just kind of your average guy in Wisconsin. I work a day job. I do my podcast and my role-playing game is kind of like a side hustle. Dabble in music a little bit. So lately gotten I've started dabbling with AI generated music where you've got the programs where you can write your lyrics and then put them in, and then the computer gives you a song, which is certainly an interesting experience. And so other than that, enjoy playing role playing games and video games in my spare time when I have it.
That's cool. So does the AI music like pull from other stuff you've created to kind of like build something that's like your style?
Well, it depends. I mean, I have done music on my own, mostly with
Hmm.
like MIDI files. I use it as background music for one of the podcasts I do. But the way the AI music works is you put in what type of a style of music you want to use, and then you put in your lyrics, and the AI tries to make a song out of it. And it's interesting because sometimes it'll get it right the first time, but other times sometimes it just doesn't do a very good job at making a song around it. I've had times where for no reason it'll repeat a verse or to like mix up lyrics, and if you're using words from foreign languages, then it really gets interesting because sometimes it doesn't pronounce it correctly. So
Hmm. Yeah. So it's singing the music as well. It's not you singing it. The AI is doing the vocalization.
yeah, the AI creates the music and the vocals for it. So I've been told my singing sounds kind of like a dying seal, so I would never make it as a singer for a band.
People just don't like the Wisconsin accent for singing is something I've noticed. And I don't know why I like it.
Hmm.
I could tell that was where you were from when I was listening to your podcast earlier. It's just like, I know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been told I have a very typical Midwest Wisconsin accent.
Yep. Yeah. Almost Canadian, but not quite. What got you started playing RPGs?
Well, I was first introduced to them way back in the early 80s, back in the days of basic D&D when elf, dwarf, and race were classes and
Oh, yeah.
not just a race. I was introduced by a combination of my older cousin and some older family friends. I remember watching them play Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, and even though I may not have really understood all that was going on, I found it fascinating and I picked up the D&D box set. Tried playing it a little bit over the years, but I wasn't able to start playing it on a more regular basis until the late 80s.
I wasn't born then, so still feels like a long time to me. But cool, cool.
Yeah, tell me about it. And I probably have dice that are older than you, not to brag or anything.
The old like ones you have to color in to get the numbers.
Yes, I have a set of that. Actually, I don't have my original box set of the basic set, but I found a copy at Goodwill that was actually in really good condition. And yeah, it had a set of the old dice and the crayons, so you had to color in the numbers. And yeah, I remember those days.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I've got the Errol Otis set there. So with
Yeah.
the woman with casting a spell, the guy with the spear, and um the dragon. And I mean, I have to say, I always liked the cover of the revised set that had the cover by Larry Elmore, where it
Hmm.
had the person fighting a red dragon. So that was always one of my favorite pieces of artwork from Larry Elmore.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really like Elmore's work. He's been very good for a very long time.
Yeah, and he's one of my favorites. I also really enjoy the work of Jeff Easley. Actually, one of the picture you can see up above me there, that's actually a Jeff Easley painting.
Hmm.
Um, Errol Otis, Dave Sutherland. So they had some really talented artists working for them back in the day.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of them stayed around for a long time, did stuff for Dragon and Dungeon magazine for like into until they stopped production, I think, or moved to the online medium.
Hmm. Yeah, and another guy I really liked, I think his name was Troy Baxa. If you've ever seen the Dark Sun box set, he had this very savage, very trying to think of the best way to say it. I mean, the he had this very savage, crude style of art that just fit the Dark Sun setting so perfectly.
Yeah, like a lot of negative space in this that just makes it look really bleak.
Oh, with Dark Sun?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the box set cover right now.
Yeah, I mean, in that, I don't know if you ever played Dark Sun or how familiar you are with it, but basically it was like post-apocalypse Dungeons and Dragons, or some people like to say it was like Mad Max meets D&D, and it had an interesting backstory behind it. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to play in that setting very often. Most of the people that I gamed with back in the day, we tended to prefer the more traditional fantasy settings of like Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk. But I've played a little bit within Dark Sun, so it's definitely not the setting for everyone because just a lot of the stuff is so different.
Hmm.
But it's definitely worth giving it a try every now and then if you can.
Yeah, from what I remember, it's sort of like this post-apocalypse where like the Earth is sort of closer to the sun, so a lot of water is dried up. There's almost no plants left, and everybody's fighting over whatever resources are left.
Yeah, because the reason that it had this ecological disaster, if my memory serves me correctly here, one of the options for high level wizards in this game world was you could try to, if you were evil, you could try to become a dragon. And if you were good, you could try to become this entity of light. And one of these evil wizards, see, normally when you're trying to become a dragon, there's certain steps you have to take, and some of them, I believe, involved killing of innocent people. And one of the past wizards tried doing too many steps at once, and that's what caused the sun to grow larger and hotter and caused the a lot of the problems with the environment. And one of the things I thought was actually there's a lot of things that were interesting about the setting. I like how they did wizards where you had two types, defilers and preservers. So a preserver was a wizard who tried to balance their magic with the environment because when you used magic, it drew some of the life essence from the land. So they were more or less along the lines of your standard wizard from Dungeons and Dragons. Defilers, on the other hand, advanced a little bit quicker because they took shortcuts, where when they used magic, they took the life from the land, but they didn't give any energy back in return. So they would create areas of infertile ground. And the more powerful the spell, the greater this area of desolation you create. It was also interesting what they did with clerics. They didn't really have gods in the traditional sense that you see in like the realms or Dragonlance or Greyhawk. You could be a Templar, which was a cleric in service to one of the Dragon Kings, or you could be an elemental cleric, and that actually determined what types of weapons and armor you could have.
Wasn't the weapon and armor thing from in a lot of like original basic and like first and second edition? I thought that was a pretty consistent thing for clerics in those editions.
Actually, it was different in the first three versions of the game. Basic D&D, or what some of us old timers call the BECMI set. Clerics could wear any armor and use a shield, but they could only use blunt weapons. And they carried that into first edition. Second edition introduced rules for like specialty priests, and that would sometimes change the types of weapons and armor that you could use.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking of, the specialty stuff. Yeah. I do remember the blunt thing specifically.
Yep. So, like I said, definitely an interesting, Dark Sun is definitely an interesting setting to check out if you have a chance.
Yeah, I agree. It's very cool. And the Defiler thing is interesting because I think I've read some third edition content that was about that, and the Templars as well. I remember that from some third edition stuff. So I guess they kind of still took pieces and put it into the extra content later on.
Yeah, I don't remember if they made a third edition or fourth edition. I think only one of them had a Dark Sun supplement. But unfortunately, the setting has more or less been kind of lost to time because I think they're trying to focus mostly on Forgotten Realms, and I mean, I'm not sure what other settings they've done in the fifth edition,
Yeah, I feel like even Greyhawk is being forgotten at this point.
which is a shame because it is one of the original systems. I mean, basic D&D, they just called it the known world, and then later it was given an official name of Mystara. But yeah, a lot of the early first edition adventures were all written specifically for Greyhawk.
Right. Yeah, that was consistent through third edition. A lot of the third edition adventures were also for Greyhawk. They weren't as much for Faerun.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't think they really had a default setting established for fourth edition, but I haven't played as much of fourth edition. And I think right now they're making fifth edition, the Forgotten Realms, as the default setting.
Yeah, fourth edition was called Points of Light or Netheris or something like that, and it was very minimal. It was like the introductory adventure, and then nothing else really was taking place in that setting. It was I wouldn't really call that a setting at all.
Yeah, and I mean, and then again, they dropped fourth edition pretty quickly. I mean, I think it only lasted for what, about 6 or 7 years before they came out with fifth.
Um, yeah, but third edition was also that quick, actually. Yeah, second edition was just around for so long that everything else has felt faster.
Yeah, that's true. Because and sometimes I've wondered why. I've noticed that too, though. It's like the edition lives have gotten so much shorter, and I think this is just my personal observation. I'm wondering if part of it is because the role-playing game industry has gotten so much more crowded, where now anyone can self-publish thanks to sites like Drive-Thru RPG or print on demand. So since it's so much easier to get involved in the publishing industry nowadays, they almost have to try to keep it as fresh as possible. So that's just my personal observation about Dungeons and Dragons and the state of the industry over the last couple of decades.
Yeah, it does feel like as like the player base has gotten bigger, kind of. They've felt like, oh, we can publish more stuff. I'm looking at the sort of timeline here now. So Basic was only around for 3 years before AD&D came out. AD&D was 12 years.
Yeah, with Basic though, they did still technically keep that around until sometime into I'm wanting to say it was the early 90s. So they did still keep making material that was compatible with that version of the rules for quite some time, but then eventually they decided, well, we'll just continue with the AD&D brand, and Basic just kind of, it still has a following, but it more or less got left by the wayside.
Yeah, they did. That is listed here in the list I'm reading off. I was just trying to truncate it, but yeah, definitely. Um, second edition was another 11 years. Third edition was 8. Fourth was 6. And fifth. Well, I mean, it's been 10 years so far, so it's looking like fifth is more like the older editions that lasted for about 12 years. And they like just did the revision, so I'm assuming they're not coming out with sixth edition anytime soon.
Yeah, and I mean, my son, he picked up the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide for the revised. I haven't really had a chance to look at them. I mean, I'm just so attached to second edition that I haven't really done a lot of fifth edition. I mean, I am currently in a fifth edition campaign, but we just started like a couple weeks ago, so it hasn't been, it hasn't been going on very long.
Hmm. Yeah, they do. I mean, it's still like rolling d20s and hitting stuff, and the spells are pretty much the same, but I feel like the skill use is very different between second and fifth edition.
Yeah, my personal thing is, I mean, I kind of like how they did simplify skills for fifth edition, but personally, I preferred how second edition gave you a much wider range, not just in the player's handbook, but then you had the various complete handbooks and all the other supplemental materials. So you could have very specialized skills, which I don't know, I guess depending on your point of view, that can be either a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, it was certainly more interesting building characters. I'm not sure if it was more enjoyable, like because I never did like a direct comparison between the two, but it was definitely more fun to be like, I'm going to take this much of rope use and this much of climbing and this much of escape artist, and those are all kind of now the same skill, and there isn't like this balancing thing you do between them.
Yeah, and I mean personally, I like how they did the non-weapon proficiencies in second edition better than how they do the skills in third in not third in fifth, just because I like being able to have that variety where if you want to have a character who is like a really good cook, you could do that in second edition where you can't really have a skill to represent that in fifth edition. I mean, you could certainly say your character can cook, but there's no real game mechanic for it.
Yeah, there's the feat for it, or you can be like tool proficiency, but those don't. I mean, the feat does something, but a feat is a huge investment compared to a non-weapon proficiency, and the proficiency component of it doesn't do anything, like you said.
Yeah, but that is one thing that I do like about fifth edition is how they handled feats, because I thought with third edition they got a little too carried away with them. But I like how in fifth edition you don't get as many feats, but the feats you do get actually do more.
Yeah, they are so much more defining what your character is, because kind of because you don't get as many choices anymore.
Yeah.
So you pick your class, you pick your archetype, and unless you're multi-classing, that's it. You're done.
Yeah, and I know another one of the changes which I actually do kind of like is how in fifth edition it's like, okay, this is your character class, this is what you're getting for equipment, and you can choose this type of pack or this type of pack, this one type of melee weapon and a missile weapon or whatever. So it just saves time, so you're not like in earlier editions, like, okay, I've got 150 gold. Now what can I get?
Yeah. I remember they started having those kind of packs in third edition. Did they not have them in second? I didn't play that for long enough to fiddle with it that way.
No, in second edition and earlier, you rolled up your starting gold and then you just went to the equipment section of the player's handbook and it's like, okay, how much does a longsword cost? Okay, how much does a shield cost? How much is chainmail? And then it didn't give you this nice, convenient, okay, here you can buy an adventurer's pack that has this, and this in it, and it's going to cost you 50 gold or whatever. No, you had to actually go through the equipment list and find everything. And of course, you had to convert between silver and copper and electrum and platinum and all that.
Oh, God, Electrum, that's right. So when did you start GMing for D&D? I'm assuming you started as a player later on?
Yeah, I originally started game mastering back in actually about the time I started playing it, because I admit I tend to be one of those forever GM type guys where early on, the people I had to play with, they wanted to play. No one wanted to actually run the game. And there was this one other guy who actually there were two other people I gamed with back in the day who were willing to be the GM, but both of them had a bad habit of making everything that happens about their character. So
Hmm.
that, that just got kind of tedious. It's like, oh, okay, your character, like when they introduced rules for katanas, of course, everyone wanted to be a katana user because they do a little bit more damage. And it's like, oh, look, we just found a katana of, you know, we've just found a Vorpal katana +5. Oh, there's only one character in the party who can use a katana. Who is that going to? Gee, I wonder. And then we had this other guy I used to play with. Oh, it's like he he would like revise his character every time they came out with a new complete handbook. So that always got kind of annoying. He had this one character he always loved playing. Are you familiar with the Lone Wolf book series?
The the like Japanese story?
Uh, it wasn't Japanese. I don't remember the guy's name who wrote it, but I'm pretty sure he was an American author, and he wrote a series of books about a person named Lone Wolf, who was a member of the Kai Lords, which he described as psychic rangers. And there were a series of novels, but there were also a series of choose your own adventure books, which I was really into back in the day. So this guy I used to game with, he loved the Lone Wolf books, which is fine, but it's like every character he made was basically Lone Wolf, and he always tried to find ways to incorporate or convert this Lone Wolf character into the D&D rule set. And like I said, every time they came out with a new complete handbook, whether it was the fighters or the paladins or the psychics handbook, he always revised his character to try to be as powerful as possible. It's like, really, dude?
I I think different people play the game for different reasons, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you just got to put up with those reasons, and everyone else can still have fun, and they can have fun in their own little mini game of what's going on at the table.
Yeah, because in the current game I'm running, the party didn't have a rogue, so I'm actually playing a rogue for the first time in I don't know how long, and I've been having fun with it. He's basically a Riz Lord, really high charisma and really high persuasion. So the charming rogue archetype, and certainly been interesting to play.
Hmm. Yeah. Is this for fifth edition or second edition for that one?
This is for fifth edition, and previously in fifth edition, I've always played either a ranger or a fighter. And actually, generally in the gaming groups I've been in, I usually like playing the fighter, the ranger, or one of the warrior archetypes. I've never actually been as much into playing rogues or wizards.
Yeah. I've always liked the rogues or fighters better. I don't usually like the spellcasting ones very much when I'm playing. Okay, so I wanted to talk about sort of your different, I guess projects might be the best word for it, because you have like the podcast, which has a bunch of different little branches coming off of the tree for it, and you also have the two games that you want to talk about, Strange Things Afoot and Caught in the Backrooms. Why don't you tell us about the podcast first?
Okay, my podcast is Point of Insanity Network, and I do podcasts on a variety of different things. The first one I started doing was called Geekery in General, which was about Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games, other aspects of geek culture. I also have one I do called Creepypasta Theater, which is I do a narration of a creepypasta story, and then those are actually kind of fun to put together, doing the narration and then putting in the background music and occasionally sound effects. And then also I do a podcast called Strange and Interesting, which is about folklore, paranormal, urban legends, and just other things that I happen to find interesting.
Yeah, I think you had a Geekery in General one that I was listening to that was about the Backrooms and how they're sort of this like cultural folktale that no one really controls anymore, and it sort of bled into the what did you say the other one, the sort of modern urban myths one?
Yeah, Strange Things Afoot. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that so it sort of bled into that with the because you were talking about Slender Man and how that's still like copyrighted and controlled by the creator, whereas the Backrooms is not. So there's connections going through everything that I can see now.
yeah, because it's interesting with the Backrooms. I mean, some people refer to it as a creepypasta. Some people refer to it as an urban legend, but I really wouldn't put it in either of those categories. It's definitely not really an urban legend because urban legends are approached with this mentality that it might be true or it might not be true. When we've known all along that the Backrooms is something that people made up, but it's not really a creepypasta because it's not really a specific story. I guess the way I've always described it as an internet phenomenon or collectively created setting. That's, in my opinion, those are probably the best ways to describe what the Backrooms are.
So I feel like the Backrooms are something that some people might start believing now, because I feel like they're an idea that's sort of bled over from video games, where there is an actual thing that exists in video games where there's sort of a developer area that's separate from the actual game. It usually exists below the game, and if you can sort of fall through the right point of the game, you'll end up in that area if you keep falling down into it. And then that sort of bled over into the real world where just where people were making fun of it, but then I feel like children that aren't familiar with that concept, because it's much more like the developer area is now really well hidden in modern games, might not understand that this is just applying video game concepts to real life. Instead of thinking of it that way, they'll think of it as like a real thing.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I am a part of a Backrooms Facebook group, and I know we all like sharing pictures of creepy or spooky places we've been to, and so we're kind of creating our own Backrooms image library in a way.
That's cool. And I mean, you mentioned Slender Man in that podcast episode, and I feel like that's one that has definitely bled in that area where it was originally created as just like, oh, look at this spooky image, and the creator was very upfront about it being fake, but now there's like people that think it's real, and there was like two girls that killed someone as some sort of sacrifice thing that they were doing. So there are definitely people that think it's a real thing.
Yeah, that happened in my own home state of Wisconsin, and this is going to be kind of nitpicky. But I remember listening to various reports on it, and the city that it took place in is the correct pronunciation is Waukesha, but it's like it's one of those Wisconsin city names that like outsiders don't always pronounce correctly. Like I heard one person pronounce it Waukesha, like Waukesha or something like that. It's like no, it's pronounced Waukesha.
There's so many things around the Great Lakes that are like that. I'm very used to it.
Yeah, but yeah, the story behind it is that one of the girls thought that Slender Man was going to threaten their families, and the only way that they could protect their families is that they had to kill one of their classmates in order to appease the Slender Man, and then they were going to go to become his proxies and live in his house up in the Shimanagon forest. So yeah, I'm not sure where they got that from, but fortunately the stabbing victim survived, but it was definitely it was certainly sparked a panic.
Yeah. I mean, point being there that like things start off where people understand that they are fake, but that understanding does not always that this is fake carry over to everyone that is being told that story. And the point I'm trying to make there is that like that's kind of how urban legends start. Like someone says, "Oh, there must be alligators in the sewers," and now probably 10% of New York believes that, even though it's no, it's not true.
Yeah, and I've always loved urban legends, even going back to as a kid, and it's always interesting how yeah some of them are flat out fake, but occasionally there are urban legends that do end up being true, or at least partially true. And I'd have to say probably one of my favorite urban legends is that of the haunted house that's so scary no one has ever finished it.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, the I remember hearing about it back in the early 90s, and a friend of mine from high school back then was telling me that there's a place that does like a haunted house and it costs like $50 to get in. But and there were like 5 floors to it, and each floor that you managed to get past, you got $10 back. And if you managed to make it all the way to the end, you would get all your money back. But it was, again, supposedly so frightening, no one could finish it. And then later on, I would hear other variations of the story. Some variations say you only get your money back if you make it all the way through. There's other variations that say that the reason no one ever finished is because when you're about to get to the exit, one of the staff members like pushes you down a slide and takes you back to the beginning, or the path to the exit would require you to like walk on a thin beam over a pit of snakes or broken glass, so it just wasn't worth the risk of getting your money back. So it's just one of those fun urban legends because of all the different regional variations you'll hear to it.
Okay, I think I have heard some version of that, so that sounds familiar now. Maybe from listening to your podcast, actually. I don't know where I heard it from, but okay. Right, so you have the different shows that are all sort of in the same feed for the Point of Insanity, but there's like different ones. So if someone doesn't like the creepypasta theater ones, then they just don't download those. They can download the other ones, is the idea.
Yep.
And I probably will download some of those around Halloween. So I like listening to them around then.
Yeah.
And it's cool. Like I love the like extra bits that people bring in with like sound effects for those stories instead of just reading them, like bringing in like, oh, the door creaked open and they add a little creak to it. It's cool.
Yeah, and I've listened to other podcasts that do the creepypasta narrations, and some of them do really good jobs at it where, they put in the background music and the actual side of sound effects. But I have heard a couple where there'll be like one person reading and then someone in the background doing like the creak sound effect, or if the story mentions wolves, they'll start howling, and it's like, okay, now you guys just sound amateur and pathetic, and it's distracting from the story. Cut it out.
Yeah, that goes more towards comedy instead of horror, where it's like a subversion of what you're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you made 2 different games that I wanted to talk about with you. And let's do Strange Things Afoot first.
Okay.
So give a brief description about what the game is first.
Okay. Strange Things Afoot is a modern horror urban fantasy game that draws inspiration from creepypastas and urban legends. The tagline for the game is, if you read about it on the internet, it must be true. And you take the role of high school students who are investigating paranormal activities and often coming into contact with cultists or supernatural creatures. Now, one type of creature that you might encounter during the course of a campaign is a tulpa. And if Slender Man was in the game, he's an example of a tulpa. These are entities who can only manifest on Earth if people believe in them. However, you actually can use that power of belief to your advantage because, like, let's say that you're going to use Slender Man in your campaign, and the players can start to write stories, well, their characters rather, not the players, but the characters can write stories about Slender Man and put them on the internet to try to make people believe that he has some sort of weakness. And if enough people believe it, then that means when Slender Man manifests, he has to abide by that restriction. So if you put stories out there saying he's afraid of the color yellow, and if enough people believe that, when Slender Man manifests, if you're wearing yellow clothing, the game master might give you a defensive bonus of some kind because that color is protecting you from the Slender Man. So the different character classes that you have are all based on various stereotypes you have in high school. Like there's the jock, the scout, there's the New Ager, which is one of the 2 magic using characters. Then there's like the occultist, who's kind of like your creepy goth kid who also can use magic. There's the entertainer. They would be like your band geek or your theater kid, your preppy nerd, and then the student who doesn't really have a specific clique he belongs to, so he has a little more flexibility in character generation.
Okay. One of the main things you do in the game is like try and come up with stories that edit a legend kind of so that you can interact with it in a more advantageous way.
That's yeah. The purpose of the stories is if the game master is going to have the characters come in contact with a tulpa, which is something you would save for the very end of the campaign. But it's not necessary because tulpas are very powerful. In some ways, I would compare it to Call of Cthulhu. You're not going to fight Cthulhu himself. You're more likely to be in conflict with his cultists and his other intermediaries.
Hmm.
But if the players do decide they want to tackle a tulpa head on, they can try to write these stories as a way to tip the odds in their favor. Now, it's extremely unlikely that they can truly defeat a tulpa permanently. Because of the way that these characters manifest, the only way you can truly defeat a tulpa is if you get everyone to stop believing in them. And then eventually that causes their power to dwindle, and then they wouldn't be able to manifest anymore. But if you do have to fight them, this is your best option, is to try to give them these weaknesses that you can exploit.
Okay. And is all of the adversaries tulpas, or are there other sort of monsters that are concrete instead of powered by belief?
Okay, there are. First of all, tulpas will often work through proxies. So the proxy is a character who's made a deal with the tulpa. They will carry out the tulpa's bidding in exchange for power. And there are also various supernatural creatures that you can encounter as well. I did write a book which did have some separate entities. The Because the core rule book has base stats that you can use, but I made a book that actually had more individual or more specific information for these creatures. And there's some that I drew from folklore and mythology, and then others that I just made up. So yes, there are entities you can face other than tulpas.
Okay.
But another one of the challenges that you have to keep in mind when you're playing a game of Strange Things Afoot is the fact that you're teenagers in the modern world. So that means you're living under your parents' house, your parents' rules. So you got to try to keep your activities secret from your parents. So if you make a habit of stumbling home at 3 in the morning, covered in cuts and bruises and with your, clothes all ripped up, you probably are going to need to try to find a way to explain that. You also have to be careful because, well, modern age, everyone has a cell phone on them. And, there's surveillance cameras everywhere. So that's another thing you have to be mindful of, especially if you're going to have to like trespass into an abandoned mall in order to investigate something. You're going to have to make sure that the police don't catch you. There are also organizations within the world of Strange Things Afoot. Like, for example, there's one of them in the US called Omega 9. They would be roughly similar to, if you're familiar with the SCP Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're similar to them in that their main goal is to investigate paranormal activity and contain any threats. And it is certainly possible that your characters might encounter them, but more likely what they're going to do is they're just going to confiscate any, special items you might have and then erase your memory so you don't remember the encounter with them. And there's another group I have in there called Algol International, which deals in the trade of magic items. And then there's a few others as well. Some of them inspired by different creepypastas I've read over the years.
So this touches on one of the things I was curious about for the way adventures are approached in this setting is that like my natural instinct when I'm running into some situation as a teenager and it's like I might get killed by an axe murderer or something would be, I should talk to the police or my parents and get help, not hide it from them.
And it's a balancing act. It's something that you have to be careful of because, I mean, yes, if you are attacked by a homicidal maniac wielding an axe, obviously calling the police is going to be your main, your probably your first course of action. But if you're sneaking into an abandoned building to investigate activity from a demonic cult, you probably don't want to tell that to your parents because they're probably going to ground you and, probably take away your cell phone and, restrict your freedoms. And that, of course, could interfere with the course of an adventure.
Okay.
So it's one of those things where the players are encouraged to use discretion on how they interact with people who don't know about the true nature of what they're doing.
And it's kind of on the DM to keep it within the sort of not narrow space necessarily, but the space where they want to act by themselves and can't involve adults because then it would ruin it.
Exactly. It's like I said, it's that balancing act between being a normal teenager, a normal high school student who has to worry about completing their homework, and being someone investigating these paranormal activities and possibly fighting supernatural creatures. So it's kind of like, in a way, like how superheroes sometimes have to balance their public identity with their secret identity. Clark Kent has to both be, the reporter for the Daily Planet as well as being Superman. And Batman, of course, has to balance being the the person in charge of Wayne Industries with being Batman and so on.
Yeah, and I guess many superhero stories also deal with teenage superheroes, Spider-Man being a big example where he has to balance not telling May because then she'll make him stop or want to make him stop. And we still want to have fun playing the game, so we don't want to have our parents tell us to take a time out.
Exactly, and you never know if the cultists that you're in conflict with, if they find out where you live, well, that might not be good either.
No, definitely not. So how does action resolution work in this game? For like, you're rolling a d20 or a d6? How does it work?
Yep. Well, it uses your standard set of d4 through d20, and most rolls are resolved using either a challenge roll or a skill roll. Skill rolls are pretty simple. You just roll a d20 and add any relevant modifiers. If you get a 5 or better, that's an easy check. A 10 or better is an average skill check, and then 15 or better is a hard skill check. Now, with challenge rolls, those are used when you're performing an action that someone wants to resist. Classic example, if someone tries to punch you in the face, most likely you're going to want to avoid that. So you roll the d20 as the attacker, and you add any relevant modifiers. The defender rolls d20, adds any relevant modifiers. Compare the results. Higher roll wins. Tie goes to the attacker. And it works the same way with magic as well, where, again, roll d20, add modifiers, compare the results, and higher roll wins. Ties always go to the aggressor.
And your modifiers are mostly based off of the different like archetype you choose, like jock, nerd, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it comes from two different things. First, instead of your normal statistics like you have in D&D, instead of like strength and dex and intelligence, you have what are called core classes, all of them named after different classes in school, and also they're ranked on a letter grade, F through A.
Oh.
So kind of a whimsical side of the game. So you've got your PE, which is your general all-around physical conditioning. Grammar, your ability to influence people with the written and spoken word. Academics, your basic. It's like kind of like your intelligence, your ability to apply and recall information. home economics, which usually use it for first aid or for spotting things that are hidden or out of place. But you can also use it for other things like cooking or sewing or emergency preparedness. Um, Shop class, your ability to repair and build things, as well as manual dexterity. And then finally, willpower, your ability to resist fear and temptation, as well as use and resist magic. Because every character in this game, see, willpower is important for everyone because characters in this game have something called their greatest fear and their sacred bond. So your greatest fear is something that scares the living bejeebus out of you, whether it's snakes or spiders. And whenever you encounter something that is based off of your greatest fear, you have to make a willpower check or your mental state gets shifted down. And the lower it gets, the worse your modifiers get. So you start to suffer penalties. Your sacred bond is something that you feel obligated to protect, whether it's cats or dogs or your family members. And when your sacred bond is in danger, then it actually has a chance to shift your mental state up, which will give you bonuses. And then, of course, certain spells can reduce or increase your mental state as well.
Oh, I really love the stat arrangement you have there, like having it be roughly tied to like school ideas and school grades is really cool for bringing in the like just on your character sheet, like the idea that these are high schoolers. So is this a game that, I can pick up on Drive-Thru RPG or somewhere? Where is it?
Yes, if you go to Drive-Thru RPG and look up Point of Insanity Game Studio, you can purchase uh, the digital version of it. Though I also have a couple of demos up as well. So if you want to try before you buy, and then if you want to pick up the physical copies, right now I'm only selling those through Lulu.com, through their print on demand. So that should be able to find it by looking up the name, or if you look up my name, Al Seeger, as the author, you should be able to find it that way as well.
Yep, and I'm gonna put links to all this stuff in the episode notes, so if anyone's interested, you can find it there. Okay. Um, Anything else you wanted to say about that game before we move to the next one?
Nope. So right now I've got 3 books for it. I've got the core rule book. The second book is called Carnival of Creatures, which has some monsters that you can use for the game. And then the other one is called Treasure Trove, which talks about how to create magic items in the game, as well as listing several different artifacts and magic items that your players might come across.
Yeah, it's cool. Like most people, when they make a game, just sort of release the one book and then they're done. So it's great that you have additional stuff. How much playtesting did you do for it? Was that within like your group and friends, family?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how much time I put into it, but I got feedback from conventions, and just as a tip for anyone out there who's thinking of publishing a game, and if you are looking for the best possible feedback, running demos at conventions is always the right way to go. Because these are people that chances are you've never met before in your life, you'll probably never see again. So they will give you the most brutally honest feedback you can imagine. Because, usually your friends, they don't want to hurt your feelings or come off as being discouraging. So they sometimes will they'll sometimes approach it with the kid gloves. I don't know if that makes sense or not. They're not going to be as brutally honest. But yeah, complete strangers, yeah, if they think something sucks, then they will tell you it sucks. And hey, that's fine. As long as you're giving constructive criticism, and as long as you're telling me that as long as you're not telling me my game is worse than Fatal, that's all I care about.
It's gotta be pretty bad to be that far.
I assume you've heard of Fatal.
Yes, that's the like quasi-sexual racist one. That's just a mess.
Yeah, it's considered one of it's considered the most it's considered the worst role-playing game ever released because yeah, not only do you have the misogyny and the racism and all that stuff, but I guess the game mechanics are really, really bad as well.
Yeah. So even the if you move past all of the like weird character creation stuff and actually try to play it, I've heard it's even bad at that point. It's just like it's the worst game
Yeah.
RPG ever made, easily. Um, well, let's talk about a good game. So the other one you made is called Caught in the Backrooms, which has a similar like sort of spooky concept. And the Backrooms, I feel like we already kind of covered what that is, and I can kind of guess what this game is about based off the name. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Well, Caught on the Backrooms, actually the how I got introduced to the Backrooms does actually tie in with Strange Things Afoot because in one of the test groups I was running, I took them into this underground complex with like, bare cinder block walls and flickering lights. And one of the play testers who also did some of the artwork for the game was like, this reminds me of the Backrooms. And I'm like, well, what's that? I've never heard of the Backrooms before. So he told me about it. And then when I got home, I started looking into it and, thought it was pretty cool. So this one I actually co-authored with a friend of mine. It started out as an idea I had on geekery in general, where we were talking about how you could run a game in the back rooms. Um, when we both agreed that part of the problem with a lot of the current systems is it wouldn't really have as accurate a feel to the back rooms because your characters start out as these heroes. And at least in my opinion, the core essence of the Backrooms game we designed was you're an ordinary person caught in an extraordinary circumstance. So there is going to be a lot of emphasis on survival and avoiding combat, at least early on, because just the way no clipping works, in theory, you could roll out of bed one morning, no clip through your floor, and now you're in the back rooms with nothing but your pajamas, and that's it. So, it could be if the game master decides to do that to you, it's going to be very tricky to survive early on, at least until you start gathering weapons and equipment.
Yeah, I think the feeling of powerlessness is very important for it because you shouldn't feel strong there. It should feel like disorienting and strange. And having a heroic character that can like punch through walls or teleporting doesn't exactly fit with that idea.
Yeah, and it's like I said, ordinary people in an extraordinary circumstance. Because we toyed around with the idea at first of making it a 5e compatible game, but we decided not to do that because, as he put it, 5th edition starts you out as basically a superhero. So you're not going to have that feeling of helplessness that you should have at the start of a campaign. It should actually be more along the lines of basic D&D where, okay, you're a fighter with 5 hit points, a sword, and a suit of chainmail. Now go out, kill those goblins, and try not to get killed yourself.
Right, yeah. One thing before we dive more into the game, I was curious if I was trying to find like the oldest reference I could think of to the Backrooms, and I think you mentioned this photo that was published in like 2018, I think. And I think there was a 2005 Family Guy episode that kind of had that same concept where Chris gets pulled into like the Take on Me music video, and it seemed very similar in concept. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't seen a lot of Family Guy, but yeah, that sounds like something they would do. So, but what's interesting is for a long time, everyone assumed that, okay, wherever the Backrooms photo was taken is probably in an office space that's probably been either destroyed by now or it's been, it's in use. No one ever thought they would find out where it was taken. And as it turned out, it was taken at what's now a hobby store here in Wisconsin called Hobbytown USA. And I actually did an interview with the guy who owns that store, and it's interesting. There have been people who've, actually come from several states away just because they wanted to see the place where the original Backrooms photo was taken. Now it looks nothing like that today. When the photo was taken, they had moved into this location and they were doing some remodeling. The original building used to be a furniture store, and the place where the Backrooms photo was taken was an area where they would put out like the bedroom sets and the office sets so you could see what it looks like and see how big the bed or the desk and stuff was. But unfortunately, there was like water damage and such, so they had to tear it down, and they eventually they converted the upper floor into a racing area, because the guy who runs the store, he's a big fan of radio controlled cars, and they actually have three separate tracks there. There's two on the top floor. One of them is like a carpet track. The other is actually really cool. It's got like rocks and logs, so it's more of like an obstacle course. And then they've got a dirt track on the first floor. So it was interesting learning about some of the background behind that building.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up the actual store now, and yeah, now it just looks like a.
Hobbytown, USA.
Oh, there's the racetrack, and yeah, they sell a lot of electric car, like RC cars.
Yeah, and when I found out, it excited me because it's like, okay, the place where the original Backrooms photo was taken is like less than 25 minutes away from my house. So when I heard about that, I contacted the store owner. It's like, I actually wrote a role-playing game based on the Backrooms. Is it, would you be interested in carrying it? So he actually sells some of my books on consignment there. So yeah, you
Oh,
can
cool.
not only can you go, so you can purchase the Caught in the Backrooms role-playing game at the building where the original Backrooms photo was taken.
That's so cool. Nice. So, back to the game. Thank you for indulging me there. Um, what's the goal in the game? Is it to escape? Because I feel like in some set, like in the video game concept of the Backrooms, usually there is no way out. Once you're there, you kind of have to reload a previous save, and that's the way out.
Well, honestly, it depends on the game master because the Backrooms has been through different stages, and before people started establishing rules, it went through a phase of what I personally call the proto Backrooms, and this is when people would post stories on Reddit and similar forums. And some of those early stories imply that you can learn how to no clip into and out of the Backrooms at will, which assumably would be very difficult to do. But later on, it was established that you enter the Backrooms totally at random, and as far as whether there's an exit or not, it's never really been fully touched on. So there is no official answer to that question. But the way we describe it in the rule book is if you want to have your characters be able to find a way out of the Backrooms, you can certainly do that. Otherwise, it becomes more or less to survive and find other people that you can trust and that you can work with, gather weapons, gather equipment, and try not to get killed.
Okay. And the Backrooms concept has evolved where it's sort of hard to navigate is one of the obvious things about it. And now there's like monsters that exist within it, but they're sort of hiding. It's like if you look at them, they disappear in some versions. So how do you characterize the different obstacles that the players are facing within the game?
Well, one of the obstacles is the nature of the Backrooms itself. We do have a sanity score in your game, in the Backrooms game, and the longer you're in the Backrooms, the more it starts to drain your sanity. And you have to find a resource called almond water in order to keep your sanity up. Because if your sanity drops to zero, you enter something called the wretched cycle, where you slowly start to transform into a creature called a wretch. And it is possible to reverse it, but only if you take the appropriate measures within a certain amount of time. So you always have to worry about your sanity. Also, certain monsters will also, well, actually, in the game we call them entities because that's what they call them in the Backrooms wiki sites. But certain entities can drain your sanity as well. And now, as far as the different entities, the most common ones are wretches, and these are, people who their sanity dropped to the point where they went insane, and then they start to evolve into this monster. So when they're going through the wretched cycle, different changes can happen. We do have stats for your standard wretch, but the game master is more than free to modify them because sometimes wretches will grow in size and strength, or they might shrink, or they might develop extra arms, or extra mouths, or extra eyes. So you can
Ugh.
have a lot of fun with that. Another type of entity that's common in the back rooms are facelings. So they resemble Slender Man in a way, in that they look like people, however, they have no facial features. They're not necessarily hostile, though. They can actually be friendly, and some facelings will work with people. Another common entity you'll face are called hounds, and they're humanoid, but they've got bestial faces, clawed hands, and clawed teeth. So they tend to roam the back rooms in packs and can be very dangerous, especially to low level players. And then there's, like I said, a whole variety of others. Some of them I got off of the Backrooms wiki sites. Others I made up on my own, or my co-author also made up a couple as well.
Got to add your own stuff to the wiki now.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Another obstacle you have to worry about is, okay, there's actually a couple different ways you can view the backrooms. Um, and this is all stuff that Backrooms fans like to debate. There's the minimalist approach, the originalist approach, and then the expansionist approach. So the originalists are the people who like to picture the backrooms as being this never-ending maze. So true to what you see in the picture. There's others that take a minimal approach where they use what's called the three model or the three layer model, because after the backrooms started to get popular, people developed a couple other levels of the backrooms. There's level 0, which looks like what we see in the backrooms photo. Level 1, which looks like a huge empty factory or warehouse, and then level 2, which is a seemingly endless maintenance tunnel. But then there's people who are called expansionists who have developed a wide variety of different levels. Like, for example, one of the levels is called level 11, the infinite city, where it looks like just a large metropolitan area, and that's where a lot of people live. There's also another one of my favorite ones is called the Terror Hotel. It looks like a hotel from the early 1900s, and there's a group in there made up of people who disappeared during the early 1900s, like Amelia Earhart and Captain Edward Smith from the Titanic. So the backrooms can actually pull in people from all sorts of different time periods. And we have that rule incorporated into the game. One of our test groups actually consisted of a police officer from Victorian England, a hippie from the 1970s, a paranormal investigator from the 2010s, and a soldier from the year 2300. So, that made for some fun role playing. But not all of these levels are safe. In addition to the levels slowly draining your sanity, there's some levels that are exceptionally hot or exceptionally cold. So you have to make sure you've got the proper equipment. Some levels have toxic atmosphere. So you have to make sure you have a gas mask. Otherwise, you're going to slowly suffocate to death. So you have to worry about that as well. So we like to think that it incorporates, not only like a dungeon crawling aspect, but it also gives you opportunities for exploration as well.
Yeah, I'm looking at the level list now on the wiki, and it's extensive.
Yeah, last I counted, there was about 250.
Yeah, it's got room for 1,000 in here. Obviously, not all of them are detailed yet. There's a lot of empty ones.
Are you looking at the fandom wiki or the wiki.wiki?
This is the wiki.wiki.
Okay. Yeah, that one is normally considered the official wiki because it's more curated. There was originally a wiki on fandom, but that one eventually started to get out of hand. You had people vandalizing pages and people coming up with really poorly designed levels. So some of the users from that site formed wiki.one, which is, as I said, more curated, and you have to get a green light before you start making a new level.
I see. This is fascinating. A lot of them say no data for the levels, and then one of them says this page does not
Yes,
exist
because
yet,
they're
which I clicked on, and it leads to a dead page. It's like actually doesn't exist.
yeah, one of my favorite levels. There's some people that have created joke levels, which are obviously not meant to be taken seriously. There's one called Mild Hell, where it looks like a large college campus, but random annoyances will happen to you all the time. Like if you start to write with a pencil, after a couple words, it's going to break, and you'll have to at least go through about half the pencil before you can get it sharpened again. Or you might be walking along a perfectly dry sidewalk, and then all of a sudden the inside of one of your shoes gets wet like you just stepped in a puddle. Um, so just little random annoyances like that to drive the players nuts.
Like that first day in Groundhog Day for Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Um, so earlier you mentioned something called almond water is how people sort of keep their sanity within the backrooms. And normally I would not associate almond flavored water with sanity. Can you explain the connection there?
It's just something from the wiki sites, so I'm not sure who came up with the idea of almond water, but that's how we reference the wiki for a lot of the material for the game. Um,
Okay.
so it's just yeah, that's just what someone decided, and we went with it.
All right. We talked a lot about the setting and how like people interact with it as players and as GMs. How does it work mechanically? Like the action resolution is still similar to Strange Things Afoot, or is it different?
Actually, it's caught in the backrooms. It's a separate system. So this one only uses D4 through D12, and it is a skill-based system. So uh, instead of having specific statistics, you have skills. Like there is one, for example, called strength, which is a skill everyone has, of course, when used when you're trying to push or pull or lift something. And it's normally measured on a D6, D8, D10, or D12. You get a certain number of character points that you can spend on your skills when you create a new character. And the more skill points you devote to a skill, the higher the die that you use. Now, the way the game mechanic works is whenever you're making a skill check, you roll the appropriate die, and then you have to get a 5 or better in order to succeed. So if you're going to hit someone with a sword, well, that would be your melee weapon skill. So if you have a D10, then well, you roll a D10 and you got to get a 5 or better. We do have skills that grant you modifiers in the game, but the modifiers are kept pretty low. So, normally a +1, maybe a +2, and if you get like +3, that's like God tier level. So, um, however, you can also have what's called a penalty shift or a bonus shift. So if you are trying to attempt an exceptionally difficult action, you roll the next die lower. So for example, if to use the example I gave before, you're trying to hit something with a sword and maybe it's poor lighting. The game master might say, okay, you're going to take a penalty shift, which means you roll the next die lower. So instead of rolling a d10 for your melee attack, you'd roll a d8 instead. Um, if you're already at a d6, then you roll a d4 and you only can succeed if you roll a 4. If you are trying to accomplish something that's exceptionally easy or you're doing it under favorable circumstances, the game master might give you a bonus shift, which means that you roll the next die up. So to use our melee weapon example again, if like you're attacking someone from behind, the game master might say, okay, make your attack with a bonus shift. So instead of rolling a d10, you roll a d12. If you already are at a d12, then you roll 2d6 instead. And again, doesn't matter what die you use as long as you're rolling, with the exception of a d4. If you get a 5 or better, then your action succeeds.
Okay. All right. Have a good grasp on that then. So it seems like you'd be failing pretty frequently until you have like a more developed character. So you're hiding and ducking away from things at the beginning.
Yeah, it is one of those situations where lower levels are tough, but once you get to a certain rank, then you start getting a +1 to all your rolls. So, we found out during testing that actually helped quite a bit. Because, yeah, I mean, I don't know how the exact percentages would work out, but, you think about it, if you've got a D6 for something, you have to get a 5 or 6. Well, yeah, your chances of, succeeding are pretty low. So, again, it's supposed to be a horror themed game where at lower levels, you're supposed to feel helpless. And unless you've specifically built your character for combat, you probably don't want to go charging into battle every chance you get. At least not until you get some armor and some decent weapons.
Yeah. In this game, did you also have sort of the same playtesting thing where you took it to demos at conventions and that kind of thing?
Yes, we tested this one for I think close to a year before releasing it. So we did testing among ourselves with friends, and then also we did run it at some conventions as well.
Okay. And where is it available now? I mean, besides the Hobby Town in Wisconsin.
Well, it is available on my store at Drive Through RPG as well, and you can also get the physical copies at my store on Lulu.
Okay, cool. Same place, easy to find.
So, and then Caught in the Backrooms right now has 3 books that I've written for it. The first one is just your regular player's handbook, so that has your character generation options. It has some common entities that you can face in the backrooms. It also covers levels 0 through 2, and also has random level generation. So if it allows you to develop new levels right on the fly. So, like, let's say you're doing an interior exploration level. Um, what you can do is like, okay, roll on this table. Okay, you're in a small room, and then there's doors to the west and the east, and then you can roll to see if there's anything special about it. Is it empty? Is there a trap in there? Are there hidden items? So we tried to make it easy to generate levels as you go, or you can obviously use this to prepare your levels well in advance.
Okay. I mean, it's, again, cool that you have so much extra stuff to help out with people for that. That's really helpful. Um, Especially for people that might not be as familiar with the backrooms.
Yeah, and then the other 2 books I have, the first one's called The Track Mapper's Guide to Levels. And with this one covers levels 3 through 99, as well as having some original levels and some special levels. And then the other one is called The Wild Warrior's Guide to Entities, which has more entities that you can throw at the players. And the names actually come from 2 of the groups within one of the major power groups of the backrooms. One of the major groups is called the MEG, or the Major Explorer Group. So their mission is to explore the backrooms, chart new levels, and try to help people who've been stranded there. So the name Track Mappers comes from one of the teams within the MEG, and their job is to explore levels that either are not well understood, or if there's a level that's newly been discovered, they'll send a team in there to try to determine how safe it is to set up outposts there. The Wild Warriors, that is a group within the MEG that specializes in neutralizing hostile entities.
Okay, so we got some actual like sort of organizations looking at stuff, which I I feel like that's not a concept that's usually part of the backrooms, from my understanding of it.
Yeah, there is in the I know it's in the wiki. I'm not sure how much they did with it in the fandom. But another major power group is called the Backrooms Non-Aligned Trained Group. Um, they're similar to the MEG in that they try to help people, but they're focused more on commerce than exploration. Another well-known group is called the Followers of Jerry. They worship a blue parrot named Jerry. And Jerry has this power where if he comes into contact with you, you fall under his control and you start to worship him like a god. So he's has this cult that he's developed around him. There's also some less reputable groups, like one that I made up specifically for the game is called the Syndicate. They're this criminal organization that runs wild in the back rooms. There's also another one called the Company of the Brass Fist, which is a mercenary group. So, a mix of stuff that we made up as well as stuff taken from the Backrooms wiki.
Okay, cool. And in your survey, you mentioned that you'd come up with a Once Upon a Yule adventure concept. Is that for Strange Things Afoot, Backrooms, or sort of both?
Well, I haven't released it yet. I'm still want to do a little bit more testing, but Once Upon a Yule it's written as a systemless adventure where you come
Okay.
into contact with various characters from Christmas folklore, such as Krampus, Belschnickel, Jack Frost, Gryla, and you're trying to help Saint Nicholas defeat a rebellion against him because he has enemies. They basically stripped him of his powers, and he needs you to help restore the balance in this world that he lives in. So far, I've tested it using second edition Dungeons and Dragons and Caught in the Backrooms. I did make stats for fifth edition, but I haven't had a chance to test that yet. But the actual game itself, what I do is for each enemy that you face, I'm like, okay, here's their basic abilities, and then you can pretty much stat them out as however's going to be most appropriate for your party and your game system that you're running.
Okay. Yeah. That's unusual. I've never heard of like a systemless adventure concept before. It always feels like it's something that's designed for at least one system, if not occasionally two, if they're trying to like stretch it between similar ones.
Yeah, because I have actually published a couple of systemless adventures. And then I've also made three products that I call systemless settings, where they're just the game world and the setting, and then I give you guidelines for how you can incorporate it into your role playing game. But ultimately, it's up to the game master to decide how they're going to stat out the enemies and how they're going to incorporate the game system to the setting.
Yeah, I feel like that is more common with settings because it is much more fluff content instead of like number content. Well, anything else you wanted to talk about today?
No, I'd just like to, certainly thank you for letting me be on your show, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk to you and enjoy talking to you about role-playing games. Hopefully it didn't go too long. When it comes to role-playing games and you get me going, it's hard for me to shut up. I will admit that.
No, this is great. Um, I always end with having the guest give a piece of DMing advice. Do you want to hand something off to the people listening?
I think my best piece of gaming of DMing advice is don't be afraid to mix in non-combat encounters in an adventure, whether it's role playing or especially puzzles. Yeah, one book I picked up at my friendly local gaming store a few months ago is called The Game Master's Book of Traps, Puzzles, and Dungeons by Jeff Ashworth. A lot of the stats and stuff in it are designed for use with fifth edition, but they're easy enough to incorporate in other systems. But it's a good resource. It's got ready-made traps. It has some guidelines on how to create riddles and puzzles. So I personally, I think it's a really good book and definitely worth a look for anyone running any game system.
I have seen this guy's stuff before. Yeah, he's got some really good ideas. Yeah, I agree. I do feel like some of his books are better than others, but the trap ones, I've always loved trap ones because it's hard to come up with your own traps, my feeling, and then you can come up with really creative ones when you look at someone else's work.
Yeah, and I admit, while I'm the kind of person who I like incorporating riddles and puzzles when I can, I'm not the best at making them. And one of my fears is always that, okay, there's a meme that goes around various role-playing circles every now and then. It's got a picture of Patrick Star from the SpongeBob series with a stupefied look on his face, and it says, "My player's trying to solve a riddle that was literally written for 6-year-olds."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's like that whenever you're incorporating riddles and puzzles. It's like sometimes I've had groups that were able to solve the puzzle right away, and then I have others where it's like they spend like, 10 or 15 minutes, which, okay, that might be a little too long. Personally, I think probably the best time for a puzzle or riddle is maybe about 5, maybe 10 minutes. Just a nice little breather for combat, but not something that's gonna, slow down the pace of the game too much.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison to video games where they'll have like a mini game within the game that I mean some people hate them, but the real purpose of them is actually to break the action. So you're not just like constantly fighting enemies because then that can reduce the sort of dopamine that you're getting from that because you get like acclimated to it. So you need to have breaks. And people say, oh, you should take a break every 45 minutes when you're playing a video game, and people don't necessarily do that. And it's a way to force you to not take a physical break, but at least a mental break from the gameplay loop that you're doing. And including that in tabletop RPGs makes total sense.
Yeah, because one adventure I've run at a couple like local conventions, I haven't published it yet, but it's a Strange Thing Afoot adventure called Saturday Detention. Basically, think of it like the Breakfast Club, except the principal is working with the forces of darkness. And there is and I actually was inspired by the Breakfast Club. I saw some meme about the Breakfast Club. It's like, that would actually make an interesting party for a Strange Things Afoot adventure. But
definitely.
About halfway through the adventure, there's a puzzle segment, and so far, most of the groups have only taken about 5 to 8 minutes to figure it out. So, they seem to enjoy it. Like I said, it's a nice little break, but it doesn't slow down the session too much. And that's something you definitely want to avoid when you're running a game at a convention because, you've only got like a 4-hour slot, so you don't want to go too long. But on the other hand, you don't want it to end too quickly. Otherwise, the players might feel like they've been ripped off.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Al. It was great talking with you. And why don't you tell people where they can go see your stuff again?
You can listen to my podcasts at poigamestudio.podbean.com. You can find me on the web at poigamestudio.com. And as I mentioned before, you can look at my products on DriveThruRPG by going to DriveThruRPG.com and looking up Point of Insanity Game Studio.
All right. Thanks again, Al. Thank you for listening to Al talk about Point of Insanity on the Setting the Stage podcast. If you'd like to check out more of Al's stuff, you can check it out on poigamestudio.com or by following any of the links in the episode description. We're also supporting one of our past guests, Peter, from episode 41, who has a Kickstarter for his game out right now. So if you'd like to check that out, there'll be a link in the episode description as well. And here's a short trailer for the game to listen to also.
Elsewhere ain't something that you know. It's something that you feel. You feel it down in the pit of your belly when you stare into the starless night. When you close your eyes in the small hours and the dark thoughts go clawing in. That's elsewhere whispering to you. It's what your sins feed and where your nightmares are born. It's that feeling of being watched as you walk through the woods. When you're standing at the edge of the cliff, something tells you, just one more step. Any of that ruminate on it too long, gamble with more than their sanity. But they're very sacred soul. All you really need, Ken, is that elsewhere ain't friendly. And it ain't from round here.
Thank you for listening. This show is sponsored by Darren. If you'd like to sponsor the show too and get episodes a week early, go to patreon.com/settingthestage.